Hello, everyone. My name is Lisa Black, and I am one of the Rogue Women Writers. We're a group of 8 thriller writers whose backgrounds range from intelligence officers to cops to photojournalists to psychotherapists. So to let you know how this is going to go, for you participants in the Zoom room, you will be in the gallery during the reading. We encourage you to introduce yourself for those in the chat bar. For those of you joining us on Facebook Live, please comment if you have anything you'd like to tell the authors, and especially if you have a question you'd like to ask. The comments will be monitored and relayed to the authors in real time. The authors will be reading only briefly, so we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers. All of the books discussed here tonight should be available through your local bookstore, but 4 lucky registrants for this event will win a free book from one of these authors, and those winning emails will be announced, should be announced at the end of the event, except I forgot to pick them. So check your emails in the next day or two to see if you are a winner. And all 4 of our authors have contributed recipes for their favorite drinks and snacks to the website, so be sure to go online and check those out. As I said, my name is Lisa Black, and I am the author of 18 novels featuring forensic specialists, which also happens to be my day job. I am based here in Florida, working with my local police department, and I am delighted to be emceeing this event. First up, Dr. TESS GERRITSEN is a Stanford grad whose 31 novels have sold 40 million copies around the world and won numerous awards. She is also a screenwriter and filmmaker, and the TV show Rizzoli and Isles, based on her novel, ran for 7 seasons. In her new book, The Summer Guests, ex-spy Maggie Bird and the Martini Club, the circle of ex-CIA friends in her cocktail-sipping book club, have formed an uneasy alliance with young police chief Joe Thibodeau. But a teenager vanishes, and Maggie's neighbor becomes the prime suspect, prompting the Martini Club to prove her friend's innocence. But the girl's wealthy family pushes for an arrest. And when authorities discover a long-dead corpse in a nearby pond, the case becomes doubly complicated, with unthinkable ties to long-buried secrets. As Joe grapples with the 2 unexplained mysteries, the Martini Club races to uncover the truth behind shadowy secrets before more lives are lost. Maggie Bird's favorite drink is, of course, a vodka martini. And her favorite snack is an antipasta tray with olives, slices of mortadella, salami, and prosciutto, with wedges of aged Parmesan cheese. All of which sounds really good right now. So for my first question, I want to go way back to 1993, and you wrote a movie called Adrift, which was made into a TV movie with Kate Jackson. Now, were you inspired by the 1974 murder of Mac and Muff Graham on Palmyra Island, about which Vincent Bugliosi wrote in The Sea Will Tell? Did that event figure into your planning?
I am amazed that you realize that, because that goes way back. Absolutely. That murder on Palmyra Island.
Mm-hmm.
I was reading the news. I was living in Hawaii, and of course, everything to do with the South Pacific was interesting to us. And we have sailboats going out of Honolulu all the time. So the idea of this rich couple on this very nice boat disappearing, and then all of a sudden their boat turns up in a different port with another couple aboard. Yeah, that did attract my attention.
Very cool. And did you meet Kate Jackson, and what was she like?
No, I didn't. The whole thing was filmed in New Zealand, so I didn't. Yeah, I know the writer. How often does a writer get to be on set, right?
Oh, that's too bad. Okay, we are going to definitely come back. But right now, I'm going to continue introducing our amazing authors. Art Bell is a former television executive who started Comedy Central and served as president of Court TV. His memoir, Constant Comedy: How I Started Comedy Central and Lost My Sense of Humor, was a finalist in the 2020 Best Book Awards in both the memoir and business categories. He lives with his wife in Utah. In his debut novel, What She's Hiding, lawyer Henry Gladstone's ex-wife Leslie bursts into his office and announces that if he doesn't hand over $250,000, they'll both be killed. Henry dismisses her story as a stupid attempt to steal his money and, despite his still smoldering desire for her, tells her to get lost. But when he comes home to find his apartment ransacked, he begins to think that Leslie may be telling the truth. And now that he desperately needs to find her, she's disappeared again. Henry and Leslie drink vodka martinis. There's a theme going here tonight. Which Art drinks too, but his preference is a Hendrick's gin martini up with a twist, very, very dry. They also share Chinese dumplings on their first date. Again, recipes on websites. So my first question for you is, so many of us authors are trying to go from novels to film because it's more money, and we think it would be easier to write a 90-page script than a 300-page book. I'm not sure we're right about that, but you did the opposite. So what made you decide to write a novel?
Well, actually, I sat down to write a short story, and the short story just kept getting longer and longer. I was really writing it to see what would happen to Henry, because he looked like he was in a lot of trouble, and I wanted to see if he could get out of it. I didn't plot the novel at all. So by the time I finished and figured out how he would get out of it, or if he would get out of it, I had about 90,000 words, and I said, oh, that's a novel. And there you have it.
Okay, that's not fair. You make it sound so easy.
It was not easy. Let me just say that for the record. It was not easy.
Okay, good. Then I feel a little better. Okay, our next author, Saratoga Schaffer, was born and raised in New York City and is an avid reader and writer. Toga is also sober and in their spare time teaches yoga, climbs rocks, and hikes mountains. In her new book, Serial Killers Support Group, when Syra Griffin's younger sister is murdered by a serial killer, Syra follows the blood trail and finds her own way forward. Using insider information, don't ask, Syra infiltrates a support group for serial killers by pretending to be one herself. Proving herself to them comes at a cost, but it's one Syra is willing to pay in the name of revenge. But the dangerous men in the group aren't the only obstacle to Syra's path for vengeance. And the further Syra descends into the deadly world of serial killers, the harder it becomes to hold on to her own humanity. Saratoga's favorite snack is sharp cheddar cheese and almonds, and their favorite drink is golden milk, which I've never heard of, but man, it's fabulous. It's milk with honey and cinnamon and turmeric in it, which we can all use a little of these days, especially at my age. So the idea of using serial killers, the idea of serial killers having a support group is a fascinating one, because it makes sense in some ways, because they're such a rare segment of the population that you think they'd feel like no one around them understands. But as psychopaths, they don't care. So what gave you the idea of these ultimate loners bonding together?
Yeah, I was reading something a couple years back. I can't remember if it was an article or a book, but there was kind of this throwaway line about how there's no such thing as a support group for murderers. And I thought, okay, but what if there was? And specifically, what if there was for serial killers? Because that's kind of like the worst version of a murderer. And the story kind of went from there, where it just latched in my brain, and I wanted to explore what that would look like and how that would work. And the story kind of just grew from there.
Very cool. And your cat is on camera behind you. And what is their name?
This is Cricket. Now she's coming down to sit on my lap. We'll probably be in and out throughout this.
That's okay. We're quite accustomed to that. Okay, our fourth author, our own rogue, Karna Bodman, began her career in San Francisco and Washington, D.C. as a television news reporter and anchor, and became deputy press secretary to Ronald Reagan. She was also sent to South America and the Far East to give speeches to government, businesses, and student groups on the president's economic priorities. Next, she was named senior director of the National Security Council. She attended arms control talks with the Soviets and traveled with the team that briefed the leaders of Great Britain, France, and Italy, as well as Pope John Paul II. These days we'll find her in Naples, Florida, only an hour or so south of me, or Washington, D.C. with her husband. In Protecting Jess, White House economist Jessica Tanner is a rising star, young, brilliant, beautiful. When her boss falls ill, she is sent to Brazil on his behalf to speak at an international conference. Assigned to accompany her is Bill Black, a stoic State Department official tasked with keeping her out of trouble. However, a year earlier, Black was part of a covert operation to intercept a massive drug shipment in Brazil, and the kingpin is hunting for revenge. Bill knows that returning to Brazil could cost him everything, but with a powerful enemy closing in, he must protect Jess while staying one step ahead of those who want him dead. And Jess likes Pinot Noir, and she learns in the story to make a simple coq au vin. So first of all, tell us more about what you did in the White House that took you to Brazil specifically.
Well, hi, everybody. Nice to be with you. Well, as you mentioned, Lisa, on a couple of summers when President Reagan would be out at the ranch in California, that was really the only time any of us could take a little bit of a vacation. And the first summer, the State Department, which sends some of us around to speak to groups, asked if I would go. And as you mentioned, I went to the Far East. Then they said, well, actually, that went okay. Where do you want to go next? I said, my choice? Oh my gosh. I've never been to South America. So they sent me to Argentina and Brazil. And so I got to know, I was all over Rio, which is on a picture of Rio is on the cover of my book. We'll get to that later. And also in Brasilia, and I was in Salvador, Recife, all over the place. And I thought, gee, what a great setting for a thriller, because there's so much going on down there, you know, with drug dealers and crime and so forth, but also the divide between rich and poor, you know, extremely wealthy people there on the beach, and poor people just like my other two back, that sort of thing. And then the other thing that sort of played into the story that I got in you know, inspiration from is on a lighter note. We had a very good friend, personal friend, who his name was Bill Black, who was President H.W. Bush's assistant chief of protocol. And he used to regale us with stories of crazy foreign delegations demanding this and that, and having to deal with seating charts and all kinds of nonsense. And I thought, this is perfect. So I have my hero, who is an undercover CIA agent, Bill Black, and his cover is to be assistant chief of protocol. So he ends up in Brazil at this conference dealing with seating charts, but also on a special assignment. And the third thing is to be protecting Jess. That's the whole deal.
Very interesting. Okay. Now we're going to hear authors read from their books. But
first, I'm going to cut in. I'm going to cut in here. And I want to let everyone know that we're going to hear something from our MC, Lisa Black, who also has a new book out this month. Lisa is going to tell you she spent the happiest 5 years of her life in a morgue. After 10 years as a secretary, she went back to school, earned a bachelor's degree in biology from Cleveland State University, and took a job as a forensic scientist at the Cuyahoga County Coroner's Office, where she analyzed gunshot residue on hands and clothes and hairs and fibers and paint and glass, DNA, blood, and many other forms of trace evidence, as well as crime scenes. Fast forward to present day, she now works as a latent print examiner for the City of Cape Coral, Florida Police Department. She lectures at writers' conventions, has appeared as a consultant on Court TV, is a member of a myriad of writers' organizations, and currently serves as the chapter president for Florida Mystery Writers of America. And in her spare time, she writes books. Her latest novel, Not Who We Expected, is the fourth book in the Lockhart Institute series. Dynamic forensic analysts Ellie Carr and Rachel Davies are enlisted by legendary rock star Billy Diamond to find his missing daughter, Devin. A level-headed student at Yale, Devin left 6 months earlier with her boyfriend, Carlos, for a career development retreat in Nevada. Her calls and notes become less frequent until they stopped. Billy wanted to give his daughter space, but after learning Carlos's body was found a few miles upstream from the ranch, he needs answers. Rachel and Ellie hatch a plan. As Ellie goes undercover, Rachel will work with Billy to learn more about Devin and unravel a second mystery, why Billy seems so familiar with Rachel's late sister Isis and their little boy who Rachel is raising. The living, the missing, and the dead all have secrets, and the answers only bring danger. So, Lisa, is it safe to say that these forensic analysts come straight out of your world?
Somewhat. Or, you know, slightly idealized. I always try and make my forensics realistic.
Right. And this story is super complex. So, like, do you nab ideas from the headlines or cases you encounter? Or do these just come straight out of your imagination? Did you actually just make it up?
Like most writers, I think it's a combination of everything. This book sprang out of getting really interested in cults after I read the Road to Jonestown, and then that kind of started me off on the topic.
Wow. So before I turn this over to you to go back to our 4 guests who deserve all the attention, for sure, but I would like you to break the ice and be the first one to read a short excerpt from Not Who We Expected.
Okay, I will try and make this fast. It starts in chapter 4. I'm going to read chapter 4. Ellie hired a car to drive her to the ranch. It was exorbitantly expensive, but would make it harder for the group to send her away if she dumped herself on their doorstep like the 30-year-old foundling she was. She and Rachel had thought that through. They had tried to think everything through. Google Maps had told them that the ranch sat at the foot of an unnamed mountain. The nearest town on the other side of said mountain was a tiny burg with the pretty name of Topaz. One of the tenets of undercover work: always be aware of your escape routes. Old habits died hard. Agnes, the Locard's amazing and slightly frightening digital forensics whiz, had helped her research Today's Enlightenment and its director, Galen. No last name, just Galen. The Today's Enlightenment webpage provided his resume. One of the youngest to graduate from MIT, went on to Harvard, IQ measured at 166, studied meditation in Tibet and New Zealand before designing his own program. To Agnes's frustration, the man didn't seem to exist outside his own website. Of course, Devin Diamond didn't exist online either. In an age where nearly every young person plastered the internet with selfies, Devin didn't even have an Instagram account. Of course, it was also an age acutely aware of the dangers of releasing your personal information across the internet, for celebs most of all, but Agnes would keep looking. The ranch itself had pages across all major sites with photographs of beaming people arm in arm, an expansive desert plus the mountain in the background. TripAdvisor reviews were resolutely positive, with comments along the lines of "best thing I ever did, really helped me out of a dark place, and I left with new meaning and direction in my life." The harshest criticism came from a Minnesotan who had complained the living conditions were sort of roughing it, and that the dinner entrees could have used more flavor. No news articles to be found, but then finding inner peace didn't grab media attention like prostitutes and the Comstock Lode. Nevada had been founded in gold and silver mining rushes with many legal but still not super profitable brothels, as well as legal and quite profitable gambling. In fact, the world-famous Mustang Ranch brothel also sat along the Truckee River between Reno and the dam where Carlos's body had turned up. Perhaps he had gone there for some comfort after the break with Devin, found that physical pleasure could not soothe his troubled soul, and plunged into the Truckee's depths, or was tossed in by some angry working girls after he welched on his belt. Neither theory seemed particularly likely. And too soon she arrived, not actually in the middle of nowhere, though it certainly appeared as such. The car ground to a halt at the graveled ribbon, the only visible drive branching out from the road in either direction. and the guy at the wheel got out without a word. He opened the trunk to hand Ellie her backpack. Then he gazed toward the group of nondescript buildings scattered along the flat earth, the nearest about 100 feet away. No people in sight, the only movement, that of a lone chicken pecking at a clump of weeds. Are you sure this is what you want, where you want to be? The driver asked her. Nope, not sure at all, popped into her mind. But Ellie was a grown-up and a former FBI agent with more than a passing acquaintance with deception and violence, and should have a better than average ability to handle whatever today's enlightenment could throw at her. If Devin figured out why she was there, she might feel a little embarrassed. Billy might withhold part of their fee. That would be the worst that could happen. At least that was what she told herself. Yes, she told the driver, I'm sure.
Yay, very good. That was
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you so much for sharing with us. And now let's go back to where you want to pick up.
We're going to hear from Tess.
Okay.
And let's hear part of the Spy Coast.
All right. Actually, this is from the Summer Guest.
Oh, yeah, not the Spy Coast. Sorry.
The one
Summer
that's
Guest.
the one coming out next week. And this is from the very beginning. Those of you who have not read the series, it concerns a group of 5 retired spies who live in a little town in Maine, which is where I live. And I am surrounded indeed by spies, real spies. So this opening chapter actually takes place in 1972 in Purity, Maine. On the last day of his life, Purity police officer Randy Peltier ordered a cup of coffee and a blueberry muffin at the Marigold Cafe. It's what he always ordered after getting off the night shift, his reward to himself for the lonely hours spent in his cruiser, keeping the streets and back roads of his town safe from drunk drivers, speeding tourists, and the occasional rabid raccoon. He sat at his usual corner table next to the window, where he could keep an eye on the activity on Main Street. A good cop never stops being watchful, even while off duty. Refill, said the waitress. Sure thing, Carla. How was it last night? Pretty quiet, she laughed, and we like it that way. As Carla went back to the kitchen, he unfolded his copy of the latest Purity Weekly and scanned the headlines. Summer reservations hit record high. Black bear sighted on Oak Street. Car crash sends 2 to hospital. All in all, a typical week in July when half the people in town were tourists from away, here on vacation, uninhibited and often drunk. Every summer they invaded from Massachusetts and New York and beyond, streaming into Maine to escape the heat and stink of their cities. It was Randy's job to keep them from hurting themselves or others, and then to wave them back home, hopefully with their wallets a little lighter. The doorbell tinkled. Randy looked up to see 2 of those out-of-towners walk into the Marigold. Oh, he knew the 2 men weren't locals because they were wearing black leather jackets when it was almost 70 degrees outside. They paused inside the door and scanned the cafe as if casing the room. They spotted Randy and momentarily froze. That's right, gentlemen, law enforcement is watching. Table for you boys, said Carla. Yeah, one of the men finally said. Randy watched as Carla led them to a table a few tables away, close enough for him to keep an eye on them. They both picked up plastic menus and studied the breakfast offerings a trifle too intently, as if trying to avoid Randy's gaze. He didn't know if these men were armed, but it never hurt to be prepared, so he reached down and unsnapped his holster. The shorter man suddenly glanced over his menu at Randy. It was just a flick of his eyes, but in that instant, their gazes connected, held. He was so focused on the men that he did not see the white van streak past his window. He heard the screech of tires, a sickening bang of metal slamming into metal, and he turned to the window, saw shattered glass littering the street, and, sweet Jesus, was that a body? Oh my God, said Carla. Randy scrambled to his feet and ran out of the Marigold. The first body lay only a few yards away in a spreading pool of blood. Across the street was another body, a woman, her pink blouse shorn open, one breast indecently exposed. Randy dragged his attention away from the bodies and looked down the street toward the sound of a blaring horn. At the end of the block was a white van, its front end embedded in the side of a parked blue sedan. The world around him seemed to halt on its axis. He moved past horrified pedestrians, their hands clapped over their mouths, past the 2 men in leather jackets who'd followed him out of the cafe. Through the freeze frame of carnage, Randy alone seemed to be in motion. As he drew close to the crashed vehicles, he saw Tarkin Fine Carpentry printed on the white van. He knew this van. He knew the driver. Randy yanked open the door, reached across Sam Tarkin's lap and released the seatbelt, You need to get out, he yelled. Suddenly, Sam's head snapped up, and Randy stared at a man who looked like Sam Tarkin, with Sam's dark hair and angular face, but the eyes. What was wrong with his eyes? The pupils were dilated to black, bottomless pools. No, this sweating, shaking creature looked like someone else. Something else. He grabbed Sam's arm and pulled. Get away, Sam shrieked. Get away from me. He clawed at Randy, and his fingernails gouged flesh. Face throbbing, Randy jerked away and felt blood trickle down his cheek. What the hell, man? Enraged now, he wrenched Sam out of the van, and they both went sprawling onto the pavement. Even then, Sam kept fighting him, thrashing. Stop it, Randy yelled. Stop fighting me. He did not feel Sam reach for his holster, the holster he'd already unsnapped. Suddenly there it was staring at him, the barrel of his own gun. Don't, he said. Sam, don't. But it was not Sam Tarkin looking back at him, and it was not Sam Tarkin who pulled the trigger. And that's the first couple pages.
Wow. That gets off to a rip-roaring start.
And then the pace picks up decades after that as we get back to my 5 spies in the town of Purity, Maine.
Very interesting. And you call the book The Summer Guest because the New England population swells in the summer, obviously, which year-round residents find annoying but lucrative.
Yes. We do.
A situation that's constant debate. I know. I took a cruise there last year, and they did just constantly debate about, this is, helpful, but is it worth it?
It's one of those constant conflicts that are probably true for every resort place in the world.
Yes. Yeah. It really much is. I live in a resort place. The funny thing is only ours is the opposite. Our population swells in the winter, and in the summer it's miserably hot, but at least you can go to a restaurant and not wait an hour. So it's like, I totally understand the situation in this book. And I love the fact that Maggie is of a certain age. You said in an interview that people start to be ignored when they hit 60 or so. And that's where I am. So, I get that. And in some ways I love it. It's like having an invisibility cloak, That's it's like I can walk past a group of men now and they don't even see me, and that
they don't bother us anymore.
No, not a single comment or look or anything. That would not have happened when I was 23.
Right. Well, that was really what inspired the Spy Coast, the first book in the series, because I myself was getting older, and I would look around at my little town in Maine where we have a large population of retired CIA people, and wondered what their lives were like now that they're retired after having lived really interesting lives abroad. And I imagined that their brains were still working, that they still wanted to be useful.
Yeah.
And at their ages, with their gray hair, they're probably better at being spies than anybody else.
You would think. I wonder if it's like the opposite for them, that all of a sudden, they have neighbor, after being undercover for so long, suddenly now they have neighbors talking to them and knowing their name, and they're like, oh man,
Well, they don't
knows
talk.
who I am.
They don't talk. We find out little by little which ones were CIA through various means, but sometimes their own kids will reveal them. And a lot of the stories I get are from the grown children now, about what mom and dad did in the war.
Oh. So with shows like Matlock, using a character's age as a plot device, that seems to be a trend right now. So do you still live surrounded by all those spies, or have you moved?
Oh, I'm still in the same town. I used to live on a street where I had an OSS retiree on my one side, and then I have a CIA retiree up the street a little bit. And my son's best friend, his parents were married spies. They don't talk about it, but you find out in other ways. It was a real estate agent who told us who they all were. He said, when they come here and their last address was Virginia, and then all of a sudden they're all here and they're all friends, you kind of get the idea. But
kind of a tip off.
There've been a couple of articles written about why are the spies in Maine, and various explanations, and it's fun to explore that in the fictional world.
I believe it. So you've interviewed many, many people as research for your books over the years. So is Diana Ward based on anyone?
Oh no, yes, she's that is the very first book, The Spy Coast, and she is a retiree who is a bit sociopathic. So I have not run into a Diana Award, thank heavens. But you know, it's a weird occupation. People who are drawn to it are both very, very intelligent. I have heard that if they have a touch of Asperger's, sometimes they're very good at this because they can keep that blank face. Um,
Ah,
yeah, and there are a lot of things that they have in common. They do. A lot of them have trouble with their marriages because they have hard time, telling the truth. A lot of them have troubles with alcohol, which is why my spies drink a lot, and that's why they're called the Martini Club. Um, but by and large, what I found is that they're incredibly interested in global affairs, and that is one of the reasons
oh,
my town has an annual conference called the Camden Conference, and it is about
oh.
global affairs. And we have ambassadors and Nobel Prize winning journalists here to give a talk once a year in a little town in the winter time. And how did they get here? I think it was all started by retired CIA.
If you ever watched Burn Notice, um, one of his voiceovers, he was saying that people with unhappy childhoods make great spies because they're used to thinking on their feet, they're used to traveling light, and they never get homesick.
Well, that's probably not too far from the truth, but they also have usually incredible facility for languages.
True, true. Okay, well, this has been fascinating, but we're going to have to move on to art and hear part of what she's hiding.
I feel responsible for cutting off the last conversation now.
No, no.
And it was fascinating. This is what she's hiding. It's my first novel, so be gentle.
Okay.
This is a passage from the beginning. And as Lisa mentioned, this is all kicked off by a surprise visit to Henry's office by his ex-wife, Leslie. Leslie, I said, how distressing to see you. I stayed seated safely behind my desk, watching as she closed the door and, uninvited, settled into the chair in the corner of my office. She stared down at her purse and started latching and unlatching it, a nervous habit she developed right after we got married. The clicking of the latch always bothered me. Ordinarily, I would ask her to stop, but this time I had no intention of opening the conversation. She finally put her purse to the side and the office was quiet except for the ticking of my desk clock. Henry, I don't know how else to say this, so I'll just say it. I need money, a lot of money, and if I don't get it... She hesitated, looked down, pushed a few stray strands of hair behind her right ear before looking up. You'll help me, won't you? I thought back on the phone calls from my divorce lawyer, telling me that Leslie had rejected our latest offer, that she wouldn't be satisfied until she took me for everything I owned. In the end, she'd gotten what she deserved, which was not much, but more than I cared to shell out, given that our marriage didn't even make it past year 2. You've got a lot of balls coming to me for help, I replied. The answer's no. So, unless there's anything else, I stood up, walked around my desk, and put my hand on the door handle. Please hear me out, she said. After we separated, I interrupted. You mean after you walked out? Yes, okay. After I walked out, Stop, I said. I'm sure this is a terrific story, but find someone else to tell it to. Great seeing you, Leslie. Let's not do it again soon, okay? I opened the door. Henry, they threatened me. If I don't lay my hands on $250,000 before next week, they said they'd kill me. I stuck my head outside my office door and checked if anyone was near enough to hear what she'd said. I couldn't afford to feed this to the gossip machine and have it printed, bound, and distributed to the firm's partners. Bad for my career. Okay, Leslie, that's plenty. I cocked my thumb toward the hall. Leave. Wait, you gotta listen to me, she pleaded. Then she let me have it. They said they'd kill you too. I looked down both sides of the hallway. Mercifully, there was nobody close enough to hear what Leslie had just said. I closed the door and glared at her. $250,000 in a week or we're both dead. Have I got this right? By saying it out loud, I expected Leslie to realize how ludicrous this little fable of hers sounded. Then she'd admit trying to scam me out of whatever money I had left after the divorce settlement. We'd share a laugh and she'd leave my office, tell me I'd never see her again, just like the last time when she'd walked out saying she'd never see me again. Instead, she blew her nose with a tissue, then looked up at me, her magnificent eyes streaked with mascara, her eyebrows pleading, her face lovely enough to make it all work. Henry, you've got to believe me, she said through tears. I've lied to you before, but this is true. Her supplicating gaze followed me like a spotlight as I walked back to my desk and sat down. As much as I've enjoyed this, I think your visit is over, I said, gesturing toward the door. Henry, wait, she said. I can prove it. I looked at my watch. I've got a meeting in 10 minutes and I need to hit the men's room first. I knew I would regret what I was about to say, but I said it anyway. So you've got 5 minutes to prove it. This better be good. I leaned back in my chair and waited for the bullshit to start. She hesitated. I made a show of checking my watch. 4 minutes, 30 seconds, I said. Forget it, she said. You'll believe me when you're staring down the barrel of a gun, wondering if you'll hear the shot that kills you. I laughed. Why, that's almost poetic. At least your grifter's patter is improving. She stood up and walked out. This time she slammed the door.
Well, that's quite a beginning. It gives us the whole setup right there. So, and you can just picture it, I can picture the lawyer's office and the ex-wife coming in. So why is Henry a lawyer instead of like a TV exec? What made you decide to make him a lawyer?
I wanted Henry to be the most ordinary of guys. And TV executives, in my experience, are not ordinary. So it would take a lot of explaining, in the book to say what TV executives do and how they do it and why they do it. I thought lawyers were pretty relatable, as just, everybody knows lawyers. I knew a lot of lawyers at Court TV, so I didn't have to do too much research on what lawyers did and how they did it and what they thought. As a matter of fact, I knew a lot of lawyers who didn't want to be lawyers. Every lawyer who didn't want to be a lawyer found their way to Court TV and wanted to be on television. So, so that's where I started. And the setup was the setup. I mean, that's mostly what I had when I sat down to write the book. I didn't know much else. I knew the characters. I thought a lot about the characters.
So to answer a question we're going to get to later, so you're a pantser, not a plotter.
Yes, absolutely. And proud of it.
That's okay. That's plenty of writers are. It's just us plotters don't understand how you can do that, because I'd write myself into a corner and by like the second chapter, I think, if I tried that.
Yeah, and I lay awake many nights trying to get out of corners I'd written myself out of, into rather, and you figure it out or not.
Well, I'm dying to read your memoir, but I knew I'd have a bazillion questions about actors, and we're supposed to be all about books here, so not going to. But you lived in New York, I assume, while at Comedy Central. How did you get to Utah?
Well, we like to ski, and we chose Utah because it was a beautiful place, great skiing, 40 minutes from the airport. That's important. And the summer times are better than the winter times. I mean, it's just beautiful out here in the summer. We like to hike, bike, and do all those things. And everybody out here is great.
Very cool. So I was just on Court TV. Well, not on. I don't even know where I was. I was on Vinny Politano's show.
Yeah, Vinny, great guy.
Yeah. So was that in New York too? Which one were you at first? Comedy Central or
I was at Comedy Central first. I was very young. I was actually at HBO when I pitched comedy, full-time comedy channel, and they told me I was crazy and it would never work. But I didn't give up. I kept working it. So finally someone said yes.
And definitely proved them wrong, because it's still going very, very strong.
Yes.
Did you base Boris on anybody?
You know what? I didn't base any of the characters on anybody. They were sort of like the women tended to be based on all the women I knew when I was younger, just the girlfriends or, friends who were women. But no, I didn't base Boris on anyone. Boris is the bad guy. I just made him up.
Okay. And I'm kind of pen pals with an internet obsessed recluse who keeps telling me I should be a guest on Coast to Coast AM, which is a radio show largely about aliens and paranormal occurrences, founded by the late Art Bell.
Well, that's the difference between us. He's late and I'm not late yet.
Yeah.
And it's funny you bring him up for a couple of reasons. One, whenever I traveled, because I was in the TV business and I said my name was Art Bell, people would ask me if I was that Art Bell, and I'd say, no, he's a radio Art Bell. I'm on the television Art Bell. And then he died. So it got easier to sort of distinguish between us. And now they're making a movie about the guy. They're making a biopic with, yeah. So he's back in the news, much to my chagrin.
Yeah. Yeah, because if you Google Art Bell, up he comes.
I know. His producer, when I wrote the book, his producer wrote me and said, I want to talk to you. I want to meet you because you're showing up all over Google, where usually it was just us showing up all over Google. And it was very cute.
Good. I don't know. I'd be maybe you should be a little nervous about meeting him. He wants to like eliminate you and, and keep only one Art Bell on the internet. There's room for only one of us.
Well, it's confusing, and my publisher begged me to change my name, but I didn't.
So now that you've written a book and published it, do you think you'll write more? Do you like it? Was it fun?
That's a lot of questions. I am going to follow. It's really embarrassing to say this in front of all these people who've written lots and lots of books. I've written two, if you count my memoir. I am going to do a sequel to this one because the characters I think the characters are really fun. And so I'd like to see what happens next.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, we are going to move on to our third author, Saratoga Schaffer, and hear something of the serial killer support group.
Yes, I have my debut here. This is from Serial Killer Support Group. This is from chapter 4, so it's right after Syra, the main character, jumps through some very morally questionable hoops in order to gain access to the support group, and she's about to attend her very first meeting, and she's pretending to actually be a serial killer in order to infiltrate them. The meetings took place in the basement of a shabby former recreation center in Queens, at least for now. Apparently, according to the rules Python sent her after their encounter, the location changed every time a killer left or was kicked out of the group in order to preserve secrecy. Having the meetings in Queens worked well for Syra because at least she didn't have to travel an hour into the city, but it also concerned her because it was only a few miles from her apartment, and the thought of one of the maniacs following her home and finishing her off before she could get justice for Mira made her uncomfortable. The rec center was on a block with a deli, a smattering of residential houses, and a karate studio that looked like it had been used rigorously for a month 20 years ago and then never again. According to Python's instructions, the current meetings started promptly at noon every Tuesday. Serial killers strolling through Queens, passing hundreds of people to casually chat about their crimes. It was unfathomable, which was perhaps how Syra managed to remain calm about the fact that she was walking right into the belly of the beast. That and the fact that she didn't care what happened to her anymore. Still, Syra had purposefully planned to show up a few minutes late, not wanting to chance being alone with any of the men until she absolutely had to be. In her bag was a change of clothes and her glasses so she could duck into a coffee shop after the meeting to switch outfits. She planned to double back on the subway, taking multiple wrong stops and changing trains often to ensure she wasn't followed. Syra had been instructed to slip in through the gated entrance of the rec center, open the unlocked lobby door, and head down to the basement level meeting room. Despite being an unused building, the lobby was still papered with flyers, and the stairs leading down to the lower level had cheerful posters of stock families playing sports. Only a fine layer of dust over the surfaces revealed the building's disuse. Downstairs, the hallway stretched ahead to reveal several meeting rooms and a pair of bathrooms near the staircase. Following instructions, Syra approached a door with a little black plaque affixed to it. The plaque proclaimed it was the lower level reading room. She paused at the door. The person she was about to become had to be separate from herself. A killer. A monster. She already looked different. Now her insides had to match. The night before, Syra practiced facial expressions in front of her makeup mirror while sitting on her couch. She put on a series of horror films, each one more gruesome and violent than the last. She practiced keeping her face still during jump scares, her eyes blank during torture scenes, and her expression bland and neutral when the bad guy slaughtered innocent characters. It was eerie seeing her own face become so emotionless, and how quickly she picked it up. Syra took a few deep breaths, as if she was trying to head off a panic attack. She imagined a blast of cold air from the freezer back home rolling over her face. Confident. This woman is confident, she told herself, pulling her shoulders back, lifting her chin up. Where Syra hunched, her new persona straightened. Instead of anxiously examining everything around her, Syra's gaze became still, focused, confident, and cold. She exhaled and entered the room.
It's like, you can't stop there. I want to know what all these serial killers are like, and you know how she's going to react to them. So this book must have been a difficult tightrope to walk between making these serial killers scary enough to be intimidating to Syra, and yet helpful enough that she can figure out who killed her sister. And I'm guessing also kind of funny and human, and yet not be saying that they're not really bad people, because they are really bad people. So how did you balance all these different factors?
Yeah, the most important thing to me with the serial killers was making them feel believable and human, because you're right, they are not good people. They murder people and like it. So I wanted them to be a little bit more nuanced than just like cartoon villain bad people, and them a little bit more of a personality. And there's also 4 different types of serial killers that we tend to see. So I wanted to represent those types as well, so that we weren't just seeing the same type of person that the media tends to fixate on. So I'm giving them all different personalities and different aspects of, you know, humanity that makes them feel a little bit more real, as opposed to just, this is the bad guy.
Yeah.
Many of them.
So have you modeled any of them on real people, not necessarily killers? You said you did try to represent the 4 different types. Anything, you know, this neighbor you hate, you decided to make a serial killer or something, or a victim?
No, I tend to just, my characters kind of have a mind of their own, and they kind of are their own little people. So I don't really base them on anyone. They just sort of tend to come to me fully formed and deranged. So I just sort of let them do their thing.
And did you know, how did you decide like the different methods? Did you try and give each one a different method? You know, like one strangled and one stabbed and one shot, and you know, one smothered? Or
yeah, kind of. Well, so that's sort of part of what I do here, is that there are these 7, I call them interlude chapters, and each one is from the point of view of one of the serial killers. And it's supposed to be a little bit of an insight into their past, who they are, why they are the way that they are. So I'm trying not to so much focus on like the lurid details of their actual murders, but more of like who they are as people and how they got to this point in their life and how they got to these meetings. So they do all have different MOs. They have different ways of going about what they do. And then the meetings are kind of for them to come together and support each other. But then it's also like a way for them to show off a little bit too, in a way that's technically safe. So I don't give away too much information, because there's a lot going on, but that's sort of what Syra is doing, is trying to figure out which one does what. Does it match up to her sister's killer? And who could be who could be a suspect here.
Oh, okay. So you've also published a book of poetry, and now you're publishing this thriller, and your next book is going to be a horror novel, which sounds super cool, by the way. Are you seeking your niche, or do you just like the freedom of hopping around?
I think my niche is kind of like anything dark. Poetry is where I got my start. I've been writing poetry forever. My mom is a poet. It's just sort of always been the through line. But for novels, I think it's definitely like the darker side of humanity, the scary stuff, the things that give me personally anxiety. It's like cathartic because it's a way for me to explore that in like a controlled, safe environment. So that's what I tend to be drawn to. I would be very surprised if one day I woke up and wrote a very happy romance book, but never know. That tends to be what I'm drawn to.
Okay. So you've been a hiring agency manager, a yoga instructor, and now you're a publicist media manager for musicians. So do music artists have to have a social media platform and post on Instagram 5 days times a day like writers are told to do?
I think some of that is changing both for musicians and for writers, especially with the state of the kind of flux of social media right now. But in general, yeah, if you're a creative these days, you're not just a creative. You have to also be, your own publicist. You have to market yourself. You have to, be a public speaker. You have to do a lot of different stuff. So it's not enough anymore really to just do your creative thing. You have to also know how to do all the other things as well.
Every writer's lament. Well, that's fascinating. I wish we had more time I wish I had more time to like pick your brains about all you learned about serial killers when writing this book. But we're going to move on to Karna and hear part of Protecting Jess.
Okay, and Protecting Jess here is my 6th thriller involving the White House, foreign agents, bad guys, and so forth. Just a quick little setup, because I'm reading from chapter 42, well on into the story. And just as the setup, my heroine in Jess is down in Brazil at this conference, as indicated earlier, and Bill Black, the undercover CIA agent, has been trying to keep an eye on her with a lot of other things going on. And they've spent some dinners together and got a bit of a relationship. Well, meanwhile, the head drug dealer, who hates Bill Black because he blames him for something that happened a year ago. He's looking for revenge. And so he has his thugs watching the hotel where Bill and Jess are staying. They've been shadowing him all over town. And the bad guy says, okay, when they come out, take them. I want to deal with Bill Black myself in person. Well, he doesn't come out. He's been doing other things. So Jess happens to come out one morning to take a walk. Well, they grab her. And the kingpin says, that's okay, take her to the warehouse and I'll just use her as bait, because he'll come after her. So that's what we're going to do. So now here she is. She's stashed in this warehouse, doesn't know why she's been taken. And she's just, so upset trying to figure out what she can do and how in the world she's going to get away. And the 2 thugs have gone out for lunch, just tied her up there to a chair. And this is her scene. They were gone. Jessica was alone for the first time in hours. They had left the duct tape over her mouth, but she was pretty sure she could deal with that. Twisting her body, she leaned over to where her right hand was taped to the arm of the chair. Trying to move her fingers, she pulled and yanked and was able to get her thumb and forefinger out about an inch. She leaned way down. With her 2 fingers, she grabbed an edge of the tape on her cheek. Her nails dug into it. She pulled the tape and forced her head back at the same time. The duct tape came away from her mouth and she took a deep breath. I could sure use some water. Can't think about that now. I have to concentrate. Let's see if I can bite the other tape off my hands. She hunched over again, tried to pull it away on the right side, but the ends were taped under the chair arm. All she could do was lift up the edges a tiny bit more. Jess began scanning the room, the shelves and the equipment on the staging table, equipment for dealing with drugs. Over at the end, she saw a can. It looked familiar. She started to inch her chair along the floor, slowly moving the chair legs with her feet. She felt it scrape on the cement little by little. It was slow going, but she didn't want to tip over. She had to stay steady. As she got near the end, she looked closer. It was a blue can with a yellow and blue label, WD-40. Ha! We had tons of those in her dad's hardware store where she used to work for the summer. She knew it was silicone spray, and silicone spray could loosen an adhesive. She wiggled and pushed until the chair was right next to the table's edge, then stretched forward and clamped her teeth over the top of the can where that little red spray straw was connected. She slowly turned her head, leaned down, and managed to shove the end of the straw underneath the edge of the tape, covering her right hand. Steadying the can against her chest, she pushed down on the top with her nose. She heard a small sound as a bit of the WD-40 was shot under the duct tape. She stopped, tried to move her hand. The tape was slightly loosened. She repeated the process over and over until she felt the adhesive give away and pull her hand free. Yes, she cried out to the empty room as she quickly pulled the tape off her left hand, then started to work on her ankles. She had no idea how much time she had before the men came back. She only knew she'd better work fast. With the can placed back on the table, she got up and raced to the back room where she found a glass, filled it with water from a grimy sink, and took a big gulp. She also saw a bathroom, quickly used it, rushed back. Then she saw a microwave and a small refrigerator, but she didn't have time to look for anything to eat. She had work to do. She saw her purse with its contents spilled out on a small table. Her driver's license, wallet, money, and credit cards were all there. They took my cell phone. Why didn't they take the money? She quickly stuffed everything in her bag, turned and hurried back out to the front entrance area and tried to open the door. Just as I figured, bolted from the outside. She looked around again. No windows. Now what? I can't just stand here. When they come back, they'll tie me up again. There has to be something in here I can use. Once again, she inspected the crates and the shelves. There were hammers and nails. She might be able to use a hammer, but not if there are two of them. Besides, they were bigger than she was. That was a non-starter. The plastic bags wouldn't help. The scales wouldn't be much use either. Then she saw something else. As she reached for it, she thought, could this be a great weapon or what? There you are.
It's a nail gun.
I'm not going to tell you.
Okay.
But anyway, that's the story. We have to worry about what happens to her, what happens to him, the kingpin, and all the rest.
That was a very exciting scene. So you've set this in Brazil? Have you been to Brazil since you were with the Reagan administration? Did you go back for a fun research trip for this book?
No, I thought about it because it'd probably be tax deductible, but I didn't do that. I did a lot more research. I talked to people. I talked to our ambassador, who had been down there and things like that. But I hadn't physically been back. I do travel to some of my other locations for other books, but not that one. By the way, speaking of other books, real quickly, since we have TESS GERRITSEN here with us today, because I have to thank Tess because way back years ago, she was so kind. Here she's a big best-selling author, and I was very beginning author, and she gave me a blurb for my first book, Checkmate. Thank you, Tess. That was nice.
You're very welcome. And thank you, by the way, last time I was down your way, I had a lovely dinner with you at the country club. I think that was. Yeah.
It's nice to keep in touch with authors. I think, we encourage each other. It's great. Anyway.
She also gave me a blurb from my first book. So thank you again, Tess.
Well deserved. There you go. Right.
Okay. So
and she blurbed Art Bell's book.
Pardon?
And she blurbed Art Bell's book.
Oh.
So
keeping it all in the
Yes,
writer family.
It's a pleasure to thank you in sort of person, Zoom person. Thank you.
Right.
So Karna, back to Protecting Jess. It's the start of a new series. So what made you decide to work with a new character?
Well, I wanted to, the character, either continuing characters from my previous 5 books, but they were all, they had jobs in Homeland Security and so forth at the White House. But this girl in the story, she needed to be a White House economist. And I need to use that scene again, and but basically I need to use Bill Black, the CIA agent, because I have a rough outline of my next thriller where he's going to be quite involved. So I'm figuring out ways to keep it going, as they say. I know that readers do like continuing characters in their books. I mean, look at Lee Child and Jack Reacher and people like that, very successful.
So you wanted to talk about economics with this new character, and I minored in economics, so I love it. But is it a challenge to make it exciting for readers to try and explain these economic concepts that Jess is working on?
Well, you're right, because people say economics, oh geez,
yeah,
that is really boring. So you do have to, make it interesting. But on the other hand, I don't quote too many statistics in the book. And the point is, she's a very attractive gal. She's dynamite at the receptions. She's other men are after her and whatnot. And so you can make the character pretty memorable using other things other than statistics, I find out. Yeah.
yeah. So you can work in a few details about the international price ratio, while these men are chasing Jess. Huh?
Yeah, well, the other thing, by the way, the other thing in the book, one reason that I wanted to write it the way I did is that I'm very concerned with illicit drugs, coming into this country and all that sort of thing. I mean, we have a horrible, we know about all the fentanyl crisis and all that, but not just that, it's the cocaine and the heroin. And Brazil is one of the largest shippers of drugs. Maybe a lot of people didn't realize that it comes, they get it from Colombia and other places, and then they refine it a lot in Brazil. And they ship it up, and it comes up through Mexico and other places. But Brazil is a big, major player, and I was trying to call attention to that fact.
Yeah. Oh, very interesting detail. So, okay, I hate to wind down to an ending here eventually. This has been so much fun with you four. So let's do some quick round robin questions, and Chris may have some questions from Facebook and from our people in the chat room.
Well, we don't have a lot of questions tonight. I think everyone was just awed by the readings, but I did have a question or two, and I just want to ask quickly. Saratoga, I was really interested in your concept, and the one thing I want to know is how much do I have to suspend my disbelief? Because I think they're either self-proclaimed serial killers that are meeting on the down low, or if they're really murderers, wouldn't they be in jail if they actually were known serial killers?
Yeah, it is there is some description of that. So you do need, I think, a certain amount of disbelief, because like honestly, if there is a group of serial killers out there meeting, even if they tried to be very secretive, I think that we would probably hear about it pretty quickly. But yeah, the premise is that they are not like famous serial killers that people know. They're like undercover doing their thing. They're like the kind of serial killer where when they get caught, the neighbor is like, I had no idea he was so nice. It's
like the BK killer. Like,
yeah.
BTK killer, whatever that guy was in Wichita, Kansas. But so they have found each other and they're meeting. They've managed to kind of find each other as like human beings, right?
Yeah. And there's some like dark web stuff going on too, of like how they've actually linked up and made contact with each other.
Oh, good. Okay, and so then, Tess, I had a question for you. Your ex-CIA people, did they use their old contacts and actually do like really kind of spy things, or are they using the skill sets that they have from their years in the business? And do CIA agents have to retire at 57 like police officers have to retire?
Well, I think a lot of them probably go into management positions before retiring. They, my CI, my five, well, four of them were previously Knox, which so they were, they were operating under different names, and one of them was just an analyst. She married an analyst. She married beneath her. But they are in this town. They are absolutely retired. It's just that things happen in this town that bring them back into action. In the Summer Guests, for instance, that's really based on some real history of the CIA in Maine. We had a very small branch of MK Ultra that was operating in Midcoast. And for those of you who are not familiar with MK Ultra, it was a CIA project that was running from the 50s to the 70s, testing psychoactive drugs on subjects who were not always aware they were getting these drugs. And it all ended in the 70s when one unfortunate CIA employee was given LSD without his knowledge and jumped out of a window and died. And then it all became known. There were congressional hearings. The head of the CIA ended up destroying all the records. And when I found that out, I thought, well, this is really open field now for a fiction author, because if there are no records, you can make up anything and nobody can say that that's not true.
Right.
So
True.
so the Summer Guest gets a little bit into the history of the CIA in Maine, and that has a little, kind of a thread into how this teenage girl goes missing and why these bones that are 50 years old are in this pond. So you see them thinking, you see them using their own abilities, not only to just to figure things out, but also one of them is good at electronics. He knows all about cameras, and the others all have their little areas of expertise that they bring to it. The fun thing is watching five old people still have it and still have adventures.
Good. Okay. And then Art, I want to know how you weave in the comedic elements into your prose. Like, is it intentional at times, or is it always just kind of organic as you're telling this story? I mean, all of the reviews say your book is hilarious. I can hardly wait to read it. But hilarious sometimes is planned and sometimes it's not. So
As a pantser, I let my characters lead the way. Henry, he's not really that funny of a guy. And honestly, there's not that much comedy there's not comedy at all. But life has humorous moments, even when things are going absolutely horribly wrong. And I drew a lot of inspiration from noir, from the old noir of the 30s, 40s, and 50s, where, there was some great wisecracking dialogue, between characters, often between the good guy and the bad guy, or the good guy and his love interest. And that's where whatever humor is in the novel, comes from. I none of these situations are funny in and of themselves. I mean, this is not like a sitcom. It's noirish. But I love hearing this Henry's sense of humor.
okay. And Karna, you are talking about doing a sequel to this and using both Jess and Black, right? In this, are they a romantic element? Is this got a sense of a romance between these two? I mean,
yeah. Yeah, in fact, I have a romantic twist in each of my books in some way. And they are involved. Yes. And
so they become like a crime fighting couple.
well, in a way, although I haven't written the book yet. I'm still thinking about it, but that's part of my plan if we can work that out. Yeah, that's right.
Good. Okay. So that's all I have. And as I said, we don't have any questions today. So
I have a quick round robin question for everyone. What is next for you? What are you working on now? We'll go counterclockwise. Art, what are you working on?
Well, strangely, I just wrote this young adult thing, which I'm continuing to work on, but that's mostly done, and I'm starting to work on the sequel to What She's Hiding. Again, I like the characters, and I want to see what happens next.
Very cool. Toga?
So I have my horror novel coming out next year. I have another horror novel that's sort of like a sapphic fairy tale retelling that I'm working on, and I am currently revising a speculative thriller. So I've got a couple different things happening.
Oh, yes. Okay, Tess?
I am working on the third book in the Spy Coast series. It's called The Shadow Friends. And one of my spies, Ingrid, who is, I like to call her the Hermione of the group because she's so smart. She's the one who's married to the analyst. An ex-lover of hers, who is also a spy, comes back into her life, kind of wants to bring her back into the light, into their old profession, and her marriage is now threatened. So we're gonna see the whole spy group people come in and try and keep this group together, while Ingrid is I guess she's having some temptations in many ways.
Okay. And Karna?
Oh, well, finally, actually, in addition to a sequel to this thriller, totally on the side, totally different issue, I've written some children's picture books. I have one out now called Wrigley at the White House. Wrigley's the name of a dog because I'm from Chicago. It's about a puppy who lives in the White House and gets into all kinds of trouble. And the next three I've written Wrigley's White House Christmas, Wrigley's White House Easter, and Wrigley's White House 4th of July. And to be honest, I'm looking for a publisher for that one because my publisher of the previous one is now only doing print books. So that's just a little sidebar, but it's a lot of fun, and I like writing for kids to teach them about the White House and puppies.
Very fun. Well, I really want to extend my thanks to all you authors that this has been such a fun evening, and really thanks for sharing your expertise and your insights about your own book. And sadly, we're out of time, but I'd like all the viewers join us next month on April 14th to talk with Heather Graham, Matt Goldman, Adam Plantigna, and DM Powell. And check your emails because you may have won one of these wonderful authors' new books. So, thanks again, and
Thank
good
you.
night, everybody.